Do you think we have free speech in this country?
Of course we do. We are exercising that.
Can you criticize Islam on this video? They say we are looking for a no hyphen society. Iranian-Canadian, of course, but we are Canadian, and that's true.
By common sense, I meant a soundbite that can be used by a political party. You don't see any platform or experience on the Conservative Party other than attacking Mark Carney.
But the problem with the Liberal Party, Democratic Party is that they get in bed with the lobbyists of the Islamic Republic, and they have no issues with that.
I wish, actually, Conservative came up with a better candidate.
Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 367 of Roqe. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Dear Iranian-Canadians, make sure to vote this time. There is a Canadian federal election less than 3 weeks away. Make sure to be there on voting day. You see, we are no longer a whisper, no longer a footnote. We are the echo of exile and maybe the architects of hope. We are one of the fastest growing diasporas and on the incline, a presence felt in boardrooms and backseats and classrooms and coastline. If presence is power, we've already rehearsed it. But political power, actual power, requires that we assert it. We say we want dignity, voice, and a stake in the land, but silence or sitting out won't deliver what participation can. Dear Iranian-Canadians, make sure to vote this time. This is not just a ballot. It is something of a reckoning with tariffs rising, housing tightening, global alliances bending, with Iran still burning in our conscience, with our parents remembering what it meant to vote, our children watching what it means to belong. Whether you stay loyal to the liberals as a tradition has told, or shift to the conservatives looking for something more bold, whether you're drawn to the left or unsettled and right, let your vote be the proof that we are stepping into the light. Dear Iranian-Canadians, make sure to vote this time. Some of us came with nothing but memory and fear. Others were born here with roots that feel clear. Some are still learning the names on the signs. Some wonder if it matters, if it's worth these designs. But listen, this is how we become more than guests. This is how we take part in the national text. Because to vote is to say, I'm not just surviving, I'm shaping, I'm choosing, I'm alive, I'm arriving. Dear Iranian-Canadians, make sure to vote this time. This is not the moment for quiescence. This is not the moment to hide behind reticence. Why not vote for the mothers who still dream in Farsi? Vote for the martyrs who died without mercy. Vote for a future that can include our name. Vote for a country that can learn how to change. The thing is, a voting bloc can bend policy, can command respect, can signal that we're here and we won't be checked. So it's time to rise from the silence, from the sidelines, from the mime. Dear Iranian-Canadians, make sure to vote this time. It's April 10, 2025. This is Roqe. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 367 of Roqe. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam dostan aziz. Durud bar shoma. Hope you're doing well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. For those of you not in Canada, and that will be at least half of you out there, for those of you listening in the States or watching us in Europe or back in Iran, it is election time here in Canada. There's a national election coming up at the end of April, and there is so much excitement on the streets. There actually isn't very much excitement on the streets. There's a few signs and some rallies taking place, but you know, it's 2 or 3 weeks away, and the excitement is building, and there's so much going on in the world, so it feels very consequential. This is an important election, and there are more people of Iranian descent living in Canada now than ever before. And this is like in the hundreds of thousands. As you may know, if you're here in Canada, you've seen all the Iranians come here, that the growth of our community. If you're somewhere else in the world, if you're in Stockholm or Sydney or San Diego, trust us, the community has grown very large here, and it's great. And so it is for the most part, it is important to take a look at where we think Iranian Canadians, those who are eligible, are going to park their vote in this election and how they should be voting. We've got a discussion/debate coming up with lawyer Sadeq Bigdeli, advocating for the Conservatives, and academic and author Mehrdad Loghmani, speaking in favor of a vote for the Liberals. Now, I'm looking forward to this. I should note we didn't choose to bring reps or advocates for the smaller parties like the Bloc or the NDP or the Greens, as we know that most Iranians will be voting either Liberal or Conservative, and we wanted to have a very clear debate, but we're willing to engage with other viewpoints as well. Please give us your thoughts after you see this discussion and debate. That is coming up in the next few moments. The great Canadian federal election debate. Where and how should Iranian Canadians vote in this election? Before we get there, let me mention that we had our latest in the Ideas at the Roqe Hub series this past Friday night with popular musician and podcaster King Ram here live in the Roqe Hub for a sold-out crowd. It was a really great night. I really appreciate King Ram doing this. It was great to have him here. It was very, very moving and profound night of conversation and performance. We're going to give you that in the coming days on Roqe. You'll have that as an episode coming up. I look forward to you hearing that conversation and that performance with King Ram. I should also mention that next week on our show, we're going to have the legendary Iranian singer, songwriter, actor, the only Iranian on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Is that right, Roham? Andy Khodamun, Andy, on this show. He's currently riding high as part of that massive international hit Azizam song by Ed Sheeran. Azizam, meet me on the... I'm not going to make a video singing that song. And enough of the videos of people making that song. I'm sorry, but let's just bring it down a little bit. Let Ed Sheeran do the song. But Andy is on that song. He's one of the voices on the recording, when they're doing the Azizam. Andy, our very own Andy, is singing there with Ed Sheeran. So that's part of what he's up to these days. But of course, a legend, someone who's never kind of ebbed out of the spotlight. He's consistently been kind of a remarkable presence. I don't think you can find anybody who doesn't have a good thing to say about Andy. Those who know him, who've worked with him, have played with him. Can't wait to have him here on the show. If you're in the Toronto area also, catch Andy with Shohreh and Donya at the Meridian Hall on Saturday, April 19th. It's about a week and a half from now. Andy live in Toronto. Andy on Roqe next Thursday. We look forward to that. All right. Here we go. Let's get into this. Today we want to delve into a question that is resonating deeply within our community here in Canada. How should Iranian Canadians cast their votes in the upcoming federal election? It's only 3 weeks away. This election is not just a routine democratic exercise. It represents a critical juncture reflecting the evolving political inclinations and priorities of Iranian Canadians. Now, historically, many Iranian Canadians have shown a preference for the Liberal Party. That was influenced by figures like Pierre Trudeau, who championed multiculturalism and progressive policies. This allegiance was particularly strong among earlier generations who settled in Canada. My father would be amongst them, viewing the Liberals as proponents of inclusive governance, devoted to Papa Trudeau. However, events in recent years have prompted a reevaluation, you might say, of political loyalties. The tragic killing of Mahsa Amini ignited a global outcry and led to increased scrutiny of Iran's human rights record. In response, a segment of the Iranian-Canadian community, a large segment, began gravitating towards the Conservative Party, attracted by its firm stance on foreign policy, promises to address international human rights violations more assertively. I mean, how long did it take for the Liberals to finally put the IRGC on the terrorist list? Adding to the complexity, the Liberal Party, now under the leadership of Mark Carney, faces scrutiny over issues of national sovereignty and economic policy, especially in light of the recent tensions with the United States. Then again, there are many Canadians of Iranian descent who believe the Liberals under Carney are better to deal with the existential threat that exists for Canada with the Trump administration to the south and a world that is increasingly chaotic and unstable. So these factors contribute to a renewed debate within the Iranian-Canadian community about political alignment. In today's episode, we want to dissect these shifting political dynamics, examine the policies of the major parties, and discuss the issues that matter most to Iranian Canadians. Our goal is to provide insights that will assist in making informed decisions at the ballot box during this pivotal election. So let's call it a discussion and or a debate, and let's get to our panel. Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part with the support of Diora Jewels. Merci Diora. Diora Jewels is a Toronto-based fine jewelry brand specializing in 18K gold pieces that blend timeless elegance with modern design. Founded with the vision of making luxurious, high-quality jewelry accessible and meaningful, Diora offers a wide range of styles, from delicate everyday essentials to statement pieces that celebrate life's special moments. With a strong online presence and a growing reputation through exclusive pop-up events, Diora Jewels is where beauty, craftsmanship, and sophistication come together to shine. Find them at Diora Jewels on Instagram, diora.jewels on Instagram. Thanks again, Diora. Here with me in the Roqe Studio are two members of the Iranian-Canadian community who are both passionate and invested in how Iranians should vote in this upcoming election, albeit for different parties. Sadeq Bigdeli is a Canadian lawyer and the principal lawyer of Bigdeli Law Professional Corporation. He recently taught immigration law as an adjunct professor at Osgoode Hall Law School, that's at York University in Toronto. Previously, he held full-time academic positions in Iran and New Zealand. In 2015, he served as Iran's negotiator at the World Trade Organization. He's the co-editor of International Trade Regulation and the Mitigation of Climate Change, published by Cambridge University Press in 2009, and has written extensively on trade, climate policy, and regulatory law. He holds an LLB from the University of Tehran, an LLM from Harvard Law School, and a PhD in international economic law from the University of Bern in Switzerland, Persian overachiever. He is also the founder of the Iranian-Canadian Advocacy Network, a grassroots initiative promoting civic engagement and political advocacy within the Iranian-Canadian community. He is advocating for a vote for the Conservative Party in this election. Welcome, Sadeq.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nice to have you here, and your props. You came with a bunch of tashrifat that...
yeah, I'm prepared.
You're prepared, or you've got assistance. I appreciate you being here. It's nice to have you here. Mehrdad Loghmani is the author of Omar Khayyam and On the Value of Time, part of the Peacemaker series for Routledge, and co-authored with Ramin Jahanbegloo of Harmony and Exchange towards a, how do I say this word?
Legoic.
Towards a legoic society. A researcher and tech executive during the day and a writer in his free time, he earned his BSc in mathematics from the University of Waterloo and his MSc in applied data science from Syracuse University in the United States. He is currently a doctoral candidate at Syracuse University. He's also co-founded Solidarity with Iran, a diverse group that promotes inclusiveness and democratic principles, and is the co-author of Charter 91, a blueprint for opening new participatory avenues in Iran. He is advocating for a vote for the Liberal Party in this election. Hello, Mehrdad.
Thank you, and good to be here.
Nice to have you here. We've known each other a long time. I appreciate your writing, and I'm happy to have you for the first time in the Roqe Studio.
Absolutely.
Thanks for doing this. So, first of all, guys, I mean, we'll try and do this in as elegantly but as passionately at the same time as possible. My first question, do you agree with my assessment that the Iranian community were traditionally liberals and that all bets are off in this election? Mehrdad.
Well, that's a hard question to ask, actually. I remember when I, with other Iranian prominent, some of whom you know, we founded Iranian-Canadian Congress at the time. I was running the first incarnation of it.
It's changed a lot over the years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I disagree with what we present today, but at the time, one of the things that came to my mind, given my background in mathematics, was statistics and reliable numbers. In Western civilization, numbers are the source of truth and power, because you have to make informed decision, and without actually a statistic, you cannot make an informed decision. And I found it very hard, actually, to get a good gauge on the Iranian community, both from economic perspective, and also from voting habit perspective. One part of it is it's not very cohesive. And because of the issues that we know.
When finally Iranian people of Iranian descent started running for office, both provincially and federally, they were mostly liberal candidates. Let's face it. Once in a while an NDP, once in a while it began to be Conservative Party, but for the most part it was.
And it was because they found the Liberal Party more welcoming, and that was a segue, or that was a path for integration to the society.
And do you feel that's changed now?
That's changed, particularly with new generation. Again, and we had that discussion the other day, right? The rift that you see, what they saw before the revolution, and they attributing that. I don't want to get into right or wrong here. The cause of that, and the parties that they see trait of representing what happened to them, and that's why you see this pivot to right. In particular, in new generation, the harder it gets in Iran, the harder.
You think that you believe the younger Iranian generations coming to Canada are more likely to move to the right?
Well, again,
you're
I don't
a math
have
guy. You don't have the stats, but if you were to speculate,
the speculation is that definitely the sense you get from social media.
Sadeq, do you generally agree with this assessment?
Yeah, that is my understanding of the current situation as well, but there are two levels to it. One is the global trend, which I agree that there is a global trend in the Iranian community abroad. We saw that in the US elections recently, that even though like Iranians usually voted Democratic, and in recent elections I got a number of friends, Iranian friends, who were even thinking about voting Trump. I mean, not a typical Republican candidate, but
a lot of
Trump,
them. Yeah,
right?
no,
so that's a global trend.
Certainly Orange County is pretty much Republican, right?
Yeah, but generally speaking, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but Iranians, usually activists, the elite, the educated, the business people, a lot of them, majority of them were in the pocket of the Democratic Party. And so I understand that that's a global trend which exists here in Canada as well. But there is a second layer to it, and that is Trudeau's 9 years of performance, which has basically led the Iranian community in Canada to feel, I would say, betrayed. They always found the Liberal Party as their home, and now they feel homeless. They feel like they've been betrayed, and I'll explain to you why.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that for sure. So let me go straight to the pivotal question, I suppose, and then work through it with a number of supplementals after that. What do you see as the most important issue for Iranian Canadians in this election, and which party is better positioned to address it? Let's start with you, Sadeq.
Okay, so I'm going to be bold. This is my assessment as somebody who...
You're going to be bold? Who knew?
Yeah. No. So...
It's not your brand to be bold.
But it's, you might come across as hyperbole, but let's get into it. This is my assessment. I call Canada of Trudeau the Islamic Republic of Canada, half jokingly.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why I do that. And obviously we know about foreign influence, ICC that you mentioned, and so it's much beyond that. I will draw for you comparisons between how the Liberal Party, and it's not only the Liberal Party, it's the Liberal NDP, which I don't really understand. Maybe you can explain to us what the difference is. Is there any difference between the two parties anymore? But the Liberal NDP government over the past 9 years is turning us into another version of what we saw in Iran, the country we escaped from because of the Islamic regime. And just let me give you a few examples.
And you believe this is the most important issue for us?
I think it is, because increasingly you feel like...
You mean socially? Is it like wokeism? Is that what we're talking about?
Okay, so part of it is... So let's start with... Wokeism is part of it. It's the ideology. Let's take what makes the Islamic Republic that we hate. Is the ideology that overrides the national interest of the Iranian people. It's a global ideology. It's globalist, and it trumps everything else in terms of the assessment of what is interest, economic interest, social interest, cultural interest of the country.
And you think that that's been the case with the
and
Liberal
I want to
government?
argue today that that is been the case. It is
Okay.
the Liberal Party's ideology is a globalist ideology. Trudeau said back in 2015 that Canada is a post-national, the first post-national country in the world. It has ideologies that trumps national interest, climatist ideology, woke ideology, anti-natural resource ideology, which I argue it goes directly against the interest of the future generations, including my children in this country.
Okay.
And
okay.
authoritarianism,
We'll come
free
back.
speech,
We'll hear more about
so
it.
on and so
So,
forth. Yeah.
Mehrdad, I was going to ask you the same question, but first you might want to respond to a comparison to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Well, that's definitely far-fetched. I profoundly disagree with that. I think what you see actually is a kind of, it's very natural. I mean, a party being in power for many number of years, and you get the voter fatigue. And it happened with Conservative, it happened with Liberals. That's very natural to see. As someone who has actually lived abroad when I was living and working in the U.S. when Trudeau was in power, I can see at the time, the first Trump administration, that was a delight for many Americans, actually. I got free hugs because of Trudeau at the time. Having said that,
He was a symbol to the world of resistance to the Trump.
And also pleasant side of the politics more. The thing is, what didn't materialize, and that was my critique of him, was you needed to use that social capital, that personality and charisma into objective politics and move the politics forward for people based on values, human rights values, the national interest, all those things that Canada stands for, right? And that didn't materialize to the extent that I'd like to see. And we're past that. He's not in power anymore. So, but the Liberal Party, and you mentioned something about the climate and environment. My father always said, wherever you go, leave that place in a better, even if it's slightly better shape. Our question to next generation, in front of the next generation, gonna be, are we leaving this planet in a better shape as they come and receive it? And the numbers are there, scientific numbers are there in terms of the climate change. No, our fathers didn't, and we may fail actually at that. So there's an obligation, and why it transcend the national borders, because everyone has to cooperate. So this idea of globalist conspiracy that I see, if you look at it, many benefits that we have is because of that global integration.
I see. That's where you're going with that.
Absolutely. I mean, the numbers are there. I mean,
just quickly, what would you say is the most important issue for Iranian Canadians in this election?
Well, the most important issue is Canada is facing an existential threat now from what we see south of the border. The thing is, I look at it as I said, in our discussion, as Rahm Emanuel said, never waste a good crisis, right? So this is an opportunity for Canada to forge nation anew. And in that renewal, in terms of what Canadian
So it's an opportunity to do what, I'm sorry?
To basically define the Canadians.
I see.
What being Canadian means.
This is, I mean, I think this is a problem for the Conservative Party, that since Trump second term, there is this surge in nationalism, and that seems to be defining this election, and exactly what Mehrdad says, who are we as Canadians, the existential question. What is your response to that being a focus?
I think the Iranian community brings here the experience that we had under, let's say, what I call fake nationalism, the kind of Mossadegh, and then later on Ahmadinejad kind of nationalism, that we're going to resist the West, we're going to resist America, they are going to. And I think it's wrong-headed. I appreciate that both parties are trying to respond to Trump's threat, and it's the way that it works. And I appreciate completely that after this happened, obviously the election swinged in the other direction.
Canadians are very sensitive about
that's true.
Americans taking over the notion of annexing Canada.
Exactly.
We have defined
state.
ourselves as not American. For that's been the definition of Canadian,
right?
for better or for worse, for many years.
But the way that you calculate the response to that you could go either the wrong way, which is what I love to compare this, the nationalists to our experience in Iran, which is we go China. We don't like you anymore. The truth is Trump said something which was outrageous, but at the end of the day, Canada is the only country, I think apart from Mexico, that didn't get any country-specific 10% tariff, only global 25% tariff on what Trump calls strategic sectors. And then the problem now is Canada is the only country besides China which has applied retaliatory tariffs against the US. So that's another lesson to be learned. You might want to do populist stuff in politics in election season, but you have to be calculated. You can't avoid the US economy. That's stupid. And the problem with the liberals is that they themselves created this problem of being reliant on the US market, 75% exports, 90% of energy exports, while hampering development of pipelines, infrastructure, and exploration.
Mehrdad,
well, go back to Diefenbaker, and we all know about Avro Arrow. That was an example, if you want to go that. So
most people don't know about that. Diefenbaker was the prime minister in the 1950s,
yes.
and early. And what was the Avro Arrow? Remind us.
Oh, it was a fabulous fighter program that Canada had, including the engine and jet engines. Mind that China is still a struggle to this day produce viable jet engines. So that's a mother of all technologies. And Diefenbaker killed both projects, actually.
Careful with
sorry. And I get passionate about that because I also, my background
you and
is
Khrushchev,
my background is also in aerospace. I was, as a former pilot, so I'm very passionate about that. So, and that program, and that was an example of beginning of the industrialization of Canada. So I would be very careful pinning it on a particular party. That was a short-sighted policy or approach to integration into the world economy. And in particular,
Diefenbaker, a conservative prime minister.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it continued after that. I mean, you could say Trudeau, the father, actually took a slightly different approach, but we never truly had a proper industrial policy and vision. And you also see it in technology sector. So I would say that cross-cutting that hasn't changed with any of the government that you've seen in place when you look at the numbers over the years. And that's something that needs to change. So that's worth promising about when I see Mark Carney as someone from his connection in terms of the finance and also policy, his experience, and also his emphasis on AI. AI is going to upend a lot of industries. Oh, that's
part of your business, right?
Absolutely. I see it firsthand.
Can I just come? We're going to come back to some of the points that you guys have just made, but I want to just as a sidebar, but an important part of this conversation. There's an interesting paradox when we talk about how should Iranian Canadians vote, because implicit in the question is that we're somehow separating Iranian Canadians from Canadians, even though we are also Canadians. Do you believe that we should be voting as Canadians of Iranian descent, that we have a responsibility to vote on Canadian domestic issues that have to do with Canada, or that foreign policy or policies that particularly affect Iran should be at the forefront of how we perceive where our votes should go? What do you think, Sadeq?
Yeah, so that's an important question. When I talk to my conservative friends, they say we are looking for a no-hyphen society. Iranian Canadian, of course, but we are Canadian, and that's true. And this election is especially important in that regard because maybe historically Iranians didn't care much about, the Liberal Party was fine, they were doing the same thing, but it's just really whoever is in power was not going to affect their everyday life. So maybe they would mostly want to represent the Iranian interests within the Canadian society. But this election, I argue, is a different one because it's about the direction of this country going the wrong way that I described, or a totally different way. And I'm not talking about 1950s, 60s, 70s. I'm only talking about the last liberal lost decade that the conservatives call it. And that's what we have to focus on. Three, basically, cycles of majority government of the liberals.
So you believe,
minority,
quote-unquote, Canadian issues trump issues that have to do with
That is
Iran
going
for
to
Iranian
affect
Canadians.
the next generation of Iranian Canadians or Canadian Canadians.
I would
in
say
this
that I would
country.
say 2 years ago, if we'd had this conversation 2 years ago, there would be a different answer. When at the height of the mass Khamenei protests, at the height of desire for change in Iran, at the height of the call for the IRGC to be on the terrorist list, I think that would be a higher priority for the Iranian community in terms of where they want to
But
park
I
their
argue
vote.
it goes hand in hand, because when we talk about what you call conspiracy theorists, and because I was part of this agenda as a WTO negotiator, I really know how it runs. I mean, usually you dismiss something as a conspiracy theory, but then there's a lot to be dissected there. That is part of the issue, which is China is part of foreign influence and the Islamic Republic. The fact that you mentioned 10 years, it took 10 years for them to put IRGC on the terrorist list, and even now, I'm leading a campaign against the way that they implemented this, because they only targeted the conscripts.
We'll get to that.
But so this is, what I'm arguing here is that it goes hand in hand. At the same time that you bring to the table, which I argue that Canadian politics, your experience, our experience as an Iranian, you're helping the Canadian society and the next generation of Canadians in this country.
How do you answer the question about where we should be focused in terms of heading towards an election as Iranian Canadians?
Well, the thing is, again, let's go to the definition of what it means to be Iranian Canadians. So people should think about that. If I want to quote John Ralston, I think that said, the strength of Canada is not its power, but its reason. So an Iranian should engage in that rational interaction and dialogue with each other. So in terms of their interest, the interest as Canadian first, and then as Iranian, because again, as I mentioned it earlier before the talk, Canada should not be amalgamation of tribes. We need a national identity, well defined. Again, this is our chance to define that intellectually, rationally, and it's not in economic terms, not just differentiate ourselves from the U.S. But having said that, it's logical to assume that people will they basically fear, they desire. You mentioned IRGC. Many families are affected here because of the haphazard implementation of the listing the IRGC, and I would say the lack of responsiveness from the Liberal Party up until now to that. So that definitely has affected people, changed their view on politics and who should they be voting for. But the thing is, if you want to engage in politics and shape that discussion, it doesn't end with casting your vote at the ballot. The problem with the Iranian communities, they stop after that. Their engagement, their participation stop after that. And in order to engage and participate and being influential, you have to produce the social capital required for that. So we have to ask as a community, where is our social capital? Who are people, the main faces that can promote that and also cultivate that? And that's it's
a chicken and egg too, because the politicians and the structures of power and the institutions have to welcome that as well. I mean, one of the things that, so I hear both of you. I mean, this one you were kind of on the same page, where you believe Canadian quote unquote domestic issues, et cetera, are should be at the forefront of our minds, even though we are Iranian Canadians. But there are issues that specifically have more impact or are more important to Iranian Canadians, whether it's settlement, whether it's immigration, whether it's foreign policy to do with Iran, etc. And I am struck by how, this is one of my little hobby horses where I get upset about it, how much the Iranian Canadian community has grown. You know, we are in the hundreds of thousands now, but nowhere near the kind of social or economic or political influence that some other communities that are in those same numbers might have. And to the credit of those communities, the Jewish community or who you want to look at, that have built a lot of important structure in Canada cohesively as a voice speaking out. We don't have that in the Iranian community. Has either party taken Iranian Canadian voters so far seriously enough in this campaign? Why or why not? Mehrdad.
Well, I don't. Well, in pockets, yes. Well, there are writings that they see influential. Absolutely, they see them showing up, showing support. But again, mostly in terms of the bi-directional relationship, you don't see that. It's fizzled out after election. It's all gone. So they see it as suggested, probably. And I'm not privy to any of that machinery working, but as someone with a background in math, I would see if I want to do it, I say engage when it matters. So that's what they do.
So you're here as partly as someone who believes that people should vote for the Liberal Party in this election. Have the Liberals been talking about issues that affect Iranian Canadians? Have they been speaking about Iranian Canadians?
Not to the extent that I like to see, to be honest with you. Yeah, I my value align with them. I'm gonna vote Liberal. I'm gonna ask people to do that. I mean, it's even more dismal, to be honest with you, on the part of Conservative. We all know about Bill C-24, and it's frightened everyone in the Harper actually.
Remind us of what that is.
C-24 was give the power, and probably your guess is better as a lawyer to discuss that, but it gave power to take citizenship away effectively at the border. So not taking it away, but deny entry and start the process for that. So that was very frightening as someone. Are we second-class citizen for some reason? So it created that tier citizenship.
So you don't believe either party has
No.
of the main two parties so
The
far?
main two party has fallen short on.
Are in this campaign you don't believe they're addressing Iranian Canadian
In this
issues?
campaign, I haven't seen.
Do you agree?
Okay, I agree that the Liberals have betrayed the Iranians. The Liberal MPs they don't care anymore. So one of the reasons
Even the Iranian ones?
Yes, and the reason for that is there is a guardian council. One of the things that I compare the Islamic Republic with this party at least, is that they handpick their own candidate, and that candidate, liberal candidate, is comfortable in a stronghold of the liberals in a writing that they don't even feel like they need the Iranian people, the Iranian voters, and that was what
They take them for
outraged
granted.
me, and that's what we are doing at the Iranian-Canadian ICANN Advocacy Network. Because now we went to the Conservative Party, and they said, "But you guys have always been liberal. How do we know that you guys are really is this a real, genuine shift?" And I tried to explain to them that yes, because of these values that we escaped from and we see being regenerated in this country, like the guardian councils, like the free speech limitations on
I'm moving it away from you.
Yeah. I told you, I warned you at the beginning.
Get
I'm
away
gonna
from
get
the microphone.
passionate. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about C-24 as well. That's another propaganda propped up by the liberals. It's not like that. As an immigration lawyer, I'll tell you, it had nothing to do with creating second-class citizens. It was exactly to target people that I don't want to name names because of legal implications, who openly defend terrorism, like Hamas and others, but because they gain Canadian citizenship, there's nothing you can do about that. So C-24 was about terrorism and treason, and there was a court process for these people to go through in order to take away their citizenship. And this government, at least the Pierre Poilievre's campus, they are not talking about regenerating that. But let's be clear about what C-24 was about.
We all know a slippery slope
Yeah.
of those definition. I mean, historically. So I want to address something that you brought up. So actually, I would love that you bring those ideas to the Liberal Party. So because I think at the end of the day, and the reason for that is you clearly see on the side of Mark Carney now a platform that is defending Canadian. That is opening the door to define the Canadian identity and bring this country together. This is our chance, actually, as Iranian-Canadian community, to be part of that, to be a participant. That requires, as I said, recreation of a public sphere on our side, in our own community. It doesn't exist today. And that's one of the reasons that no one's going to hear us. They're going to look us at the interesting voting, community, that they're part of it, is whether or not a liberal or conservative. But
Sorry, you said Mark Carney's the policies, the platform is inviting
That
Iranian
was
Canadians.
really so.
Well, no.
No,
I said no. The
I want you to know what you
no,
mean.
opportunity.
Okay.
It's open.
How is there more opportunity than there was under Trudeau? What's
The thing is, because we are in a crisis mode now. There is no denying of that, and this is our opportunity
because of the Trump, the tariffs, and all?
exactly. And we shouldn't wait for people to invite us. Politics is not about that. You have to go there and you have to fight yourself through the door. Actually, you have to fight your way in the door. And this is the opportunity for us to say we are significant, we are big. We can act. I don't want to call it the voting bloc.
But why would we do? Why does it matter if we do that under Carney or Poilievre or the NDP?
And again, you know my stance on politics in Canada. I do believe we need good parties. We don't want to have a one-party system. We need good Liberal Party, sound and rational and common sense. Conservative Party, the way.
But you want us to vote for Carney?
Yeah.
In this election,
I'm trying to help you. Why would I?
No. Absolutely. So I get that
For the fourth term.
So I would say. My stance is a rational stance. It's not a tribal stance. That's where I'm coming from. And based on the politics, but the platform that I see and his experience, I vote for Liberal and I encourage people to vote for Liberal because I see a better chance for Canada to navigate. Again, we're navigating in rough waters. And you want someone, a sound ship, an engine, in order to get where you want. You don't see any platform or experience on the Conservative Party other than attacking Mark Carney. I mean, they need to define themselves not in negative term, but also in positive. Well, how they gonna make country help Canadians stand against the threat coming from the south of the border? How are we gonna basically integrate with European economically, actually opening new markets? So I argue, Canada should be, if not the richest country in the world, one of the richest, because we have all the resources, we have all the ingredients. We need better way of making use of those resources. And I see Mark Carney actually starting to, the promises are definitely there. I mean, we may have a different discussion for years from now. But for now, based on his track record, I see a much better chance of achieving that
and
rather than
you don't think that the Conservatives have
I don't see a platform.
Okay, let's start with the facts. First, we have to see what we think has gone wrong over the past 10 years, and then what's different in the policies that have been proposed by Mark Carney. Without that, we can't really recommend anybody to do anything. Okay, so
is Mark Carney a continuation of the Trudeau years or not?
That's the most important thing. Maybe you believe in the core liberal values, and you feel like Trudeau was not a 100% performer, maybe 60, 70%. So maybe Carney is a better, like Oxford-educated, Harvard-educated guy, 23, 30% better performance. And so that's the right track for this country. I would argue that this is a fundamental debate we need to have. You mentioned that Mark Carney is good for the prosperity of this country. You're right, we are the richest country in terms of natural resources per capita in the whole world. But why is it that we are where we are? Half a percentage point GDP growth, the lowest in all 50 developed countries in the world, definitely G7, if we take it purchase parity PPP. And it's because of the values of the liberal parties that Mark Carney is the theoretician of. He theorized these values. It's just a simple fact. Either you believe in natural resource economy or you believe in climate ideology. And I'm not denying science. I've written extensively, as you mentioned, on climate and trade and all of these issues. But the ideology that I talk about is about things like Bill C-69 or other bills that were passed by this government, through the government, that Carney said openly that he's not going to repeal. It's about cap on emissions. It's about cap on oil and trade exploration. The oil exports of Canada has decreased over the past 10 years instead of being doubled and tripled. So it's very disingenuous to say that Mark Carney is going to double and triple our natural resource exports, because it's not going to happen. It's against his values.
Okay.
Just to sum it up, net zero policy is something that he takes seriously. He is in incarnation of what he calls net zero policy. Maybe temporarily he puts away some of the consumer tax on carbon, but he is the incarnation of that. So we have to be honest and open about it and say, without natural resources, this guy is going to somehow lead us into prosperity. If that's the argument, maybe we can have that argument. But that is definitely a fact that he theorized.
Well, let me get to that. So in terms of being richest country in the world is more than extractive resources. And that's been Canada's problem for many, many decades. Again, conservative and liberal party alike. Extractive resources, investing in extractive resources, or over-reliance on extractive resources versus investing in what really matter, actually. Turning into, and in terms of climate change and the environmental policy, just look at the possibilities of some of these clean sectors. Look at Tesla, for example. The value it has created. And the stock market value of Tesla, it's tanked. Thanks.
Might not be the best example right
now.
now.
No. Historically, and even today, and most of it is because of his performance,
yes,
and his political engagement. But the thing is,
Elon.
Yes, exactly. So, but when you look at the opportunity, it's the way of the future for sure. It's just like when the jet engine came and what happened to piston engines. So the thing is, do we want to have a balanced investment in this country, both based on extractive resources and also investing in the future? And Mark Carney mentioned AI, for example. That's going to exactly dwarf every other sectors in the coming decades in terms of the value that it generates. And also...
But AI takes energy.
Well, of course it's going to take energy. Where the energy
does it come from? Wind power?
Well, it could potentially. The thing is, are we denying the science here? So, or we say, we are going to run out of the fossil fuel. That's the only sure thing that's going to happen in the future. And where are we going to be in this country when those resources run out? Or when there is an alternative is found? Do we want to find ourselves?
One of the things that people say to me regularly, who are, and I have family members who weren't so happy with the Liberal Party under Trudeau, even though they've traditionally been Liberals, now back with the Liberal Party because of Carney. And one of the things they say is he is, based on his experience, based on his CV, based on his resume, based on all of his, achievements in, in the economic sort of realm, he's a better person to be at the helm facing Trump and the current issues than Poilievre, who is a career politician. How do you respond to people who say that?
Well, first of all, a response to what you said, really, we have to make it clear whether we want, as Carney said explicitly, we want to keep half of the oil and gas and natural resources under the ground, or your stance is that we have to go all the way. Fossil fuels are okay, renewables, of course, hybrid, electric. But the problem for me with the Liberals, and Mark Carney, as I said, is a symbolization of that thought, is the authoritarian way of imposing top-down these policies. No oil.
It's too ideological for you.
It's too ideological, and it's too dictatorial. They are going to impose these. Is
it, Mehrdad?
Well, I don't think so. We have a parliament. These issues are discussed. The way the policies are made in Canada it would be far-fetched to compare it even remotely with what happened, for example, in Iran. No, I don't believe that.
Do you think we have free speech in this country?
Of course we do. We are exercising that.
Can you criticize Islam on this media? Do you think you can do that?
Well,
Ontario Human Rights Commission said Islamophobia is a form of racism, and the Charter of Charter of Rights and Freedom in this country is known for
you're a lawyer. You know better than me, and well, that's where my researcher is also maybe helped me with that. It's all about context. So in what context you're criticizing Islam, and to what end?
When they take away my license, it's about my life.
Well, depends.
And that
again,
if
you can contextualize it and put it in a proper frame, it's all about framing. So again, these things.
So we don't have free speech.
Well, absolutely, we do have free speech. So the thing is, if you want to, I don't want to use sound bites here, and people, because it's very easy turn it into a slogan and a soundbite and use it and abuse it. It goes back to we have built since the Second World War, I would call it a system of rational, it's a system of rational interaction, basically, at the end of the day. And what that is, that the countries, based on interaction with each other in the Western Hemisphere, they can expect mutual trade, mutual respect, mutual guarantees in terms of defense. And now that is being upended and being replaced by a system that is replacing it with a system of personality. And that's the biggest risk that we are facing today. That's the existential, and I want Iranian Canadian to understand that this new system is upending the Western civilization as we know it. A system that is, countries are treated based how they are basically appealing to the person in the power, how they're going and, for example, I mean, if I want to use the term, kissing the ring, and that's how the treatment they are getting it. So,
and do you think that's more a problem with the liberals or the conservatives, or it's the same?
Well, that's what's happening south of the border. And
here in this country.
In this country, you see a party that has a platform, and the other side, the party that actually was borrowing a lot from the south of the border in terms of the ideology and rebranding themselves and, you know, the politics of attacking and becoming personal. Versus, so it's one side you have rationality and platform, which you can criticize. By all means, you can debate that to the end, whether or not it's right or wrong.
You believe the liberals are the rational party and the conservatives
Conservative,
are. It's funny because you're saying that the conservatives are more ideological. Your problem is you think the liberals are more ideological. Do you actually, you made a stand there about criticizing Islam. Are you suggesting that if the conservatives come to power, you would be able to criticize Islam? Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part with the very kind support of Hearty Bites. Hearty Bites is a premium charcuterie catering and grazing table business based in the Greater Toronto area. They specialize in crafting beautifully curated charcuterie boards, boxes, cups, and grazing tables for all occasions, from intimate gatherings to large corporate events. Their passion for high-quality ingredients and artistic presentation ensures that every bite is a delightful experience. With a background in food processing, food presentation techniques, and food safety, they are passionate about delivering beautiful, high-quality food presentations. We had them here for our ideas at the Roqe Hub recently, and the reviews were fabulous. A big thank you to Hearty Bites. Are you suggesting that if the conservatives come to power, you would be able to criticize Islam?
And that's one of the things that is, free speech is one of the most important things. I think it's a liberal thing, and I give you the example of the UK. We have it right in front of us, Jian. It's right in front of us. It's not only mass immigration, it's the Islamism and the wrong immigration policies, which we are pursuing here. Now, this guy came right from the UK and has the same ideologies.
This guy being Carney.
Carney, yeah. It is ideology. When it comes to climate,
you didn't answer the question about Poilievre, though, and who's going to be handling Trump better, because that seems to be really important too. Yeah. That's the thing that also, people keep saying to me, right? Do you really trust,
What do you want to come out of the negotiations between Canada and U.S.? Right now, Japan, Israel, European Union have proposed to Trump, this crazy guy, that we are going to go 0 for 0 tariffs. And that is the rational way. You always think about your economic interests first. Now, Carney, if he goes down this crazy path of nationalism, inciting the masses, what is going to come out of it? China. Oh, this guy is a China guy as well. He just got $250 million for his company before this. He knows China. He doesn't hate China the way that China is run. And that's one of my problems with the liberals. They come from a liberal democracy background, but they love engineering the society. And that the conservatives are for values. Obviously, the conservatives follow ideology as well, but that's individualism. That's property rights, and that's free speech, right? So the problem with Carney's approach to the US is, okay, let's bring in China. Electric cars, there's 100% tariff on electric cars from China. Let's make it free trade with China, and let's show the middle finger to Trump. Well, we know as Iranians where that is going to take us to, and that's the self-destructive.
Weirdly,
path.
Trump seems to like Carney based on his tweets.
Well,
you think that's a plot, a plan?
You don't know that guy knows what he's doing. He's weakening Canada.
You think that
by
Trump
prompting-
wants
yes.
Carney to win because
He
of the
doesn't
weakened
want
Canada?
a Canada first prime minister.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I want to stick to what I believe because there were so many things that kind of a little bit juxtaposition of ideas. That's
The question is about who's better to deal with Trump.
Well, definitely Mark Carney. I mean, you want someone with track record, A, B, connection. Again, we are talking about we want to build, we want to forge a new country that economically that can do trade with the world, China included, and European Union, and the rest of the world, rather than selling only to south of the border to the United States. And the question is, who's better positioned to do that? Who has the experience? Who has actually managed to go through one under the Conservative Party when he was the governor of Bank of Canada, and also seeing the crisis that UK went through when the Brexit happened. Two major, and it's very rare to come upon such a figure with such experience and such credential in the world stage today. He's truly at the world stage in terms of experience, and we have that opportunity to have it here. Again, it doesn't mean that we give a carte blanche, and that's my point about stay engaged after voting, and we need to stay engaged after voting with the Liberal Party.
And your sense, Mehrdad, of Poilievre?
Oh, well, I don't see a platform. I don't see experience. I see someone who has been, I wish actually Conservative came up with a better candidate, because we are truly at a pivotal point at this time for this country. Someone who can stand for Canadian values and not only unite the country, but also it's not about nationalism. It's about again, going back how you define Canada intellectually and rationally, because you need that powerful, the citizenry is about creativity. It's about that power of imagination. Canada is a very good idea, but that idea needs to be defined, defended, renewed, and also both intellectually and artistically composed. And that's the thing. Which party do you think is better suited to provide that?
It's funny to me. I mean, what I'm observing is that what Mehrdad said about what's wrong with the world is that certain personas are taking away everything, like Trump and this guy and that guy. When it comes to Canada, all he's argued for Carney is that this guy is a really educated guy. It's not about a platform. It's about Mark Carney being experienced and educated. And that's exactly goes against his own argument. I would argue that look at Carney's cabinet. It's the same, pretty much the same as Trudeau's cabinet. What is going to change should be our platform.
It has an Iranian-Canadian in it.
Yeah, but he was a very close part of the circle of Trudeau as well. So that's the problem. We are not discussing policy here, and we are saying that the problem with the personas and all these people. But then when it comes to Carney, this guy is a genius.
Well, to be fair, I don't think Carney falls into the category of populist personality the way
but the
of
way
Trump.
that he's propped up, why did everybody shift, like say maybe 30%?
Yes,
really low.
It's this belief
only
in
because
him
of his persona and the way that the media.
To be fair, is untested.
Yeah,
I mean, we
yeah.
don't
Well,
I personally think it was a very smart call to have the election right away.
These guys are smart.
Because I don't think I don't
smart.
think he's the best campaigner, to be honest.
Well, he's not the best campaigner, but I wouldn't say he's not tested. He has actually he has gone through two major. Actually saw Canada, and there's no more pivotal role if you're in the middle of a financial crisis to be governor of the bank in that country, and Carney was at the time. So, and also the same with UK. So in terms of untested, actually this is the crisis we have now. Our crisis, it's both existential crisis as a country, as we have to basically stay as a nation together, but B, at the end of the day, it's about economic and how financially we stay viable as a country. How do we rebuild? Actually, we are rejigging the whole factory while still everyone working, right? How we can pivot to the world away from so diversification of our portfolio, let's put it that way. And he's an economist. He has the experience. It's not about the persona. It's about objectivity. It's about rational. And if you want to make a decision and you want to hire someone for that job, you look at their
last
resume.
point on this, and I'll move to something else. You want to respond to that?
Yeah, definitely. So this is what's important. I mean, let me unpack for you the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, Bank of England experience. That's the only thing that pops up all the time that he did a great thing. So Bank of England asked Theresa May and others. He really did a bad job, as opposed to Bank of Canada. Why? Because he pursued his own ideology. He is not afraid of inflation and overspending, which is a liberal idea, is a Keynesian idea. But in this country, Bank of Canada, yes, he steered this country through the financial crisis because of Stephen Harper's conservative policies. Fiscal conservatism is key. This guy is not stupid. If it was a conservative, he would have done a good job. But now I argue he's a stooge of the liberal globalist agenda. Climate, fiscal irresponsibility. He said he's on record saying that I am not afraid of inflation is not bad. And most importantly, what you haven't responded, I really would love to hear from you. Why Carney said that Bill 69 is still okay, we are not repealing it. How would you diversify your energy export markets without the pipelines, without LNG facilities, without removing the cap on emissions? It's impossible. So you're selling me the idea that...
What is your question for Mehrdad?
So the question is, are you talking about a future of Canada which is prosperous without fossil fuels? Is that what you're selling?
Well, let's remind you again, everyone, that we are going to run out of fossil fuel. So investing in the future, it should include fossil fuel, but it should include a lot more. Again, that's why I go to the AI gonna dwarf.
Nobody has any issue with that. That's fine.
No,
Everybody can hear. Elon Musk is a conservative, and he has.
To answer that, and again, it goes to the platform, and in his platform, you see diversification of energy markets. Absolutely there. The question is how you want to do it. I mean, pipeline is a way, and he talked about building a pipeline. Well, he was, and everyone else was. You say you got the issue of Quebec actually standing in the way of building pipeline to the coast. Is that going to change? In what context it could change? So those are all the questions I think is beyond the scope of this discussion, because
I know ideas about the values of net zero carbon economy.
Well, again, that's a discussion for a different debate, but goes back to the fact, what kind of world do we want to live for our children? Do we want to consume all the fossil fuel in the name of prosperity for this generation, neglecting the effect on the climate? And for the future generation, again, this is scientifically proved. The numbers are there. It's not something that
Canada is going to save the world. And this is exactly the case. These guys are so crazy. They think Canada is the stronghold of the climate ideology because the U.S. is gone. Europe, nobody knows what's going to happen. And they are illusion, like they are thinking in this illusion that Canada, being less than 1% of emissions in the world, is going to save the world, while China is where those pipelines and the coal mines and all the fossil fuel and carbon emissions.
I don't think that's why people are going to vote Liberal. As of today, this could change in a week, but as of today, the Liberals are ahead in the polls.
Because of Carney, he is a smart guy.
Well, not just because of that.
And I don't trust the polls anyway.
I think because people, rightly or wrongly, have bought into this idea that Canada, there's an existential threat. Canada's, we could lose Canada, and that the Liberal Party, and this, to be fair, has been the traditional thing of the Big Tent Liberal Party idea that we're the protectors of Canada, that's the best place to.
They were the ones who were post-nationalist state. They had nothing to do with national identity. The Liberals are not that kind of a party. The Conservatives are the party of nationality. The Liberals don't even believe in nationality. This is all a farce.
Okay. I want to come back to the Iranian community. And we mentioned it a little earlier, but we didn't really get into it. Mehrdad, the Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau received a lot of criticism, especially after the killing of Mahsa Amini, for not. He would kind of say the right words. At one point, he even joined a protest, I think, in Ottawa with Hamid Ismailian. But this idea, and I know this because we did it on this show, at least 7 or 8 times. I brought Liberal politicians, or I did an essay about it. Why isn't the IRGC on the terrorist list? Iranians around the world were aching to get an indication from, a guy was on a hunger strike outside of the UK Parliament. There were people around the world were looking for an indication from governments who would sometimes say the right words, but that we're not going to continue enabling this regime. And we didn't get that from the Liberal Party until more recently. And there's some contention about whether what came down is actually what we want in terms of a hardline stance. I feel like that was the precipice of a lot of change for Iranian votes. I remember being at that big rally. There was 80,000 people in Richmond Hill. Maybe you were there, for freedom and democracy in Iran, and Pierre Poilievre was there, and he spoke, and there wasn't, there was no liberal of his status turning up at this event. Certainly Trudeau didn't turn up. And so that was a turning point. How do you respond to that?
Well, that was, I would call it short-sightedness. And part of it goes back to the desire of the Western countries to make a deal with Iran, with the regime in Iran. I always distinguish between the two.
With the Islamic Republic.
Oh, exactly. Islamic Republic is the regime in Iran, and you got Iran, right? So, and in that illusion, I would call it an illusion, actually, making a deal with the Islamic Republic, and IRGC, given its influence and how tightly it is integrated with, or I would say, total control of the economy in Iran. They said, if you put the IRGC in the terrorist list, it's going to create problems dealing with Iran. It's impossible to make negotiation about the nuclear deal or anything like that. So you get all that stuff going in the background. Again, things I'm not privy to. Probably none of us know deeply enough about it. So you got that hesitation in terms of pissing off the Iranian regime because they were afraid. They wanted to make a deal. And the thing is, the regime in Iran is very, very good at that keeping, because they know the change of government here in the Western countries happen every 4 years or 7 years or whatever years. And they are keeping them on the edge. They are keep selling the same mule over and over and over to different governments. The same old mule.
Let me rephrase this, make it simpler. Is it a problem for the liberals when it comes to the Iranian community that the conservatives, the current Conservative Party in this election campaign, has a leader, has people like Melissa Lantsman, others, who are crystal clear that they wouldn't make a deal with the Islamic Republic, whereas we don't totally know that from the liberals?
Well, I don't think it's anything pragmatically going to change, because it goes back to the inability to the Iranian community to harness its social capital and harness that power and basically build. That's the other thing you compare the Iranian.
So what don't you think would make a difference? What you said it wouldn't make a change.
Don't stop after casting your vote at the ballot. Actually, stay engaged.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what you're saying. So you're saying vote for the liberals and then push the liberals to
Absolutely.
not make a deal.
Stay engaged, but not just demonstrating.
Well, why wouldn't I? This is hypothetical. I'm not. I don't declare my vote. But why wouldn't I just vote for the party that's tougher on the regime?
Because I don't. It's a lot more complicated than that. Because I think pragmatically to see a change, they have to see Iranian as a viable voting bloc that can articulate itself, that just don't show up during the voting time. Stay engaged. And you compared, you brought up the Jewish community.
Yeah.
Look at how engaged they are. And again, it's not just the politics. You go the culture, art, science. They know how to promote and build the platform for their community so people can grow. Iranian community, and I have number one criticism I have is just waiting for the stars to shine somewhere else, and then they bring them on board, rather than making their own. Unless you learn.
But it's a bit of a tricky argument you're making. You're saying it's okay.
I don't have fast solutions, sorry.
Well, I know, but I mean, you're saying that it's okay that it isn't their policy. We'll stay vigilant. We should still vote liberal.
Well,
I mean, which is probably enough for some people out there. But for somebody who is really, I mean, for the kind of people who want that, Shahzadeh Reza Pahlavi maximum pressure kind of idea on Iran, that may not be enough to say, well, yeah, they haven't been hardline on it, but let's wait till after the election and keep the pressure on the party, right?
I'm just being pragmatic. Because
you are being pragmatic. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because otherwise others, they come in and promise, and they will never deliver, because there are much bigger powers behind the scene working in concert. This is a global problem. What Iran, it's a problem in the region, but it creates a global.
Do you believe Poilievre is promising things he can't necessarily?
I don't think he's at the caliber that can deliver on any of those. And big part of that solution actually lies in the Iranian community. But the problem is we always look outward to solve our problems. Don't look outward.
My problem with the liberals and the Democratic Party in the U.S. and others that I put in the same basket with these people, basically they meet all the places like Davos and others, they have a similar agenda. We have to see whether we believe in an Obama kind of engagement with Islamic Republic or not. And the left has always believed in that. We have to agree with that. That is the problem we had with the PS-752, the liberal government. All kinds of talks, but they didn't go all the way to prosecute those people in Canada. That was a big loss, and that happened intentionally. I know for a fact that 𝑫𝐻𝐻 𝐉𝐞𝐥𝐬 met with Trudeau, and all of a sudden things changed. I don't want to say that, but 𝑫𝐻𝐻 𝐉𝐞𝐿, I know for a fact, and all those people are part of that global circle of making sure that the Islamic Republic doesn't go nuts, but at the same time in the reformist camp. If you ask any typical liberal left politician in the world, they are in the camp of the reformists. And that is what infuriates the Iranian community. They no longer believe in any sort of reform in that. And you mentioned the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is not only mentioning maximum pressure, he just recently introduced a bill to the Congress on maximum support. And that's the way it should be. And I think increasingly people appreciate that. We have to educate, I agree with you, we have to educate the Conservative Party, because the Liberal Party is a reformist party to me. The Conservative Party is all maximum pressure, and we have to educate that the way that you put the pressure should come along with the maximum support for the Iranian people. One example of that is the IRGC. Let me just unpack for you. So they didn't want to do it exactly for the reason you mentioned, that we want to deal with this regime. If there are terrorists, all these people are RGC, we can't talk with the terrorists. And they just lagged and lagged and lagged their feet. And then eventually the way they did it was so bad. We approached all of these Iranian MPs, like MPs of Iranian background. Why are you targeting the IRGC like somebody who was a conscript 30 years ago, while all these other people are roaming freely in the streets of Toronto? Nobody picked up the phone. All these people trying to put pressure, going to their offices.
Yeah, I've never understood that. I've never understood why it's so hard to carve out the conscripts.
And it was so easy. And then the Conservative Party introduced a bill, very surprisingly, that exactly did that. And they said IRGC terrorist organization, and then boop, conscripts are excluded. But for a long time, I had this discussion with my liberal lawyer friends that, no, that's impossible. We can't exclude anybody. That's why we don't want to do it at all. That's part of the hypocrisy that I always come across with the liberal people, like the diplomatic.
And Mehrdad, how do the liberals defend that?
Well, I'm not privy to that discussion, but the thing, based on your social media posts, my understanding is it's actually not being exercised the way it's supposed to be, and part of it is because the U.S. laws on that. So in terms of,
you're blaming the U.S. for that as well.
Well, the security integrations, yes, absolutely. If you're IRGC conscript and you're flagged by the U.S., even when you're coming to Canada,
right?
So we all know about that. That's a big problem. Again,
it is a problem.
Oh, absolutely. You can't even get a boarding pass for that matter. You have to wait for hours. So this is a big problem. This is a big issue. Again, goes back to how it was implemented on the U.S. side, how it can be implemented in Canada, and how should it be enforced, who is it actually truly is going to affect it, and what the outcome would be. So it's a very touchy situation, and I wish that actually we had a model that other countries would follow, and they say, hey, this is a rational way of dealing with these faults. Because again, there are changing colors every day. There are moving targets. It's very hard to pin them down. And guess who you're going to target? The people who cannot move, the people who were caught in the crossfire, people who were conscripts in this case, and their families. And I appreciate the work you're doing. Actually, I saw that on the social media. It's a right way to approach it. And again, the other point, I agree with you, the stance actually the Crown Prince is having on that. And we had that discussion prior to the show. The only thing that can change in Iran, and I don't want to pivot to Iran, but you have to basically leverage the power of the armed forces in Iran to change the regime. Again, the regime is hell-bent on staying in power, and nothing going to change in Iran until you see them switch sides. And the only pragmatic voice that I've seen actually out there is from the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi on that.
And what do you want from a Canadian government with respect to that? And why do you believe the Liberal government is the right thing to do, the right party to do that?
I would like them actually pragmatically. They provide more support for the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi.
But would you trust a party that doesn't believe in regime change?
Well, the thing is, first of all, it's not up to Canada to change the regime in Iran or any other country. It's up to Iranian people.
No. But doesn't want to see regime change.
Well, they don't,
like Obama type.
Well, let's face that the Middle East, the experience of chaos there hasn't been particularly good. If you're a Western country, if you're France, Italy, or Canada as an ally, say what happened if a country like Iran goes to chaos and you see millions of people through the border. So there's a lot at stake here. Let's discuss that. But we need to discuss it in a different debate, maybe separate discussion. But again, for Iranian-Canadian here, I go back to the long view. I always have a long view on that. We need to learn to harness our social capital and how to use it. So we shouldn't wait for others to make decisions. If we don't know how to make decisions for ourselves, given the ingredients we have, others won't make a better decision for us. And that's been our experience,
but let me say something about that. The only active Iranian community abroad has been the NIAC type and the ICC as it stands to. And that's because of the Liberal Party as the Democratic Party's empowerment of them, the way that they lobby. So I agree with you that social change and the cohesiveness of the Iranian community here is lacking. But the problem with the Liberal Party, Democratic Party is that they get in bed with the lobbyists of the Islamic Republic, and they have no issues with that.
Sometimes they don't know any better. Sometimes they don't know any better.
Well, I know for a fact.
They think something called the Iranian-Canadian Congress must represent Iranians here.
What they openly defended and still do, when we had this problem with the IRGC conscripts, you know what the stand they took? So we told you from the very beginning, you have to normalize ties with the Islamic Republic, and we have to delist the IRGC as a terrorist organization. And they are the only vocal organization for the Iranian community. And I think that's because the liberals, I think, the conservatives don't care because we haven't voiced enough of our positions to them. But the liberals, they do understand. And my argument and my stance is that they completely understand, and this is by design. And this experience of NIAC with the Javad Zarif and the Democratic Party is a manifestation of that.
One of the things that, the previous sort of devotion to the Liberal Party for in the Iranian community didn't just come out of nowhere. It wasn't based on fanciful stuff. Those of us who have been here for a long time, I remember Nowruz after Nowruz going to these galas. Some of them I would host, and the Liberal politicians would be there, and the conservatives wouldn't. It was something where there was visibility. There was an understanding in the Liberal Party of the importance of this community. I'm still not convinced I see it as much from the Conservative Party. I think there's obviously been a shift, but when we talk about which party understands the Iranian-Canadian community better, I feel like there's a knee-jerk reaction of, well, the Liberals do, because they traditionally were there. How do you respond to that?
I understand that historically Iranians, why did they go to the Liberal Party as their party of choice? Immigration, diversity. I understand that. I mean, classical liberal stuff is something that I really appreciate. It's lovely. I mean, a lot like, I don't know, Rawls and all those philosophers, they're not communists, they're not socialists. Back liberalism back in the 50s and 60s. But the liberalism of now and Trudeau in the last, like, post-Obama days. I was part of Harvard's Democratic Association for Obama canvassing.
And by the way, you used Obama a few times. I think Obama has changed his opinion now too. By the way, I mean, you're talking about when you're talking about JCPOA. It's a different time, you know.
Well, that's a separate discussion to be had. But Obama changed everything. And pushed, I mean, not Obama himself, but everything changed since Obama. And the liberals, the classical liberals of the 90s, like Tony Blair, I mean, it wouldn't really, Tony Blair's policies were not that different, economic policies, from, Bush or somebody. But after Obama, they shifted towards the radical left. And we see it right here. NDP liberals, I really don't understand the difference anymore. So when it comes to that, there are problems that arise with that. So immigration is great. I'm an immigration lawyer. I immigrated during a Harper era, and that was like, at the time, the target of immigration was 220,000 PRs per year. Immigration policy in this country has never been a controversial issue, which is a great thing to be had in this country as opposed to the U.S.
It is now.
And Trudeau managed to do that. It's Trudeau's fault 100%. But now you might argue, 500,000 target and then millions of temporary
3 million in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. But let me conclude on Mark Carney, because he's going to argue that Mark Carney is different, and Trudeau even switched.
He is different.
But Mark Carney's advisor, I'll tell you, Mark Wiseman, is the co-founder of Century Initiative, and they're planning to have 100 million people in Canada. That is why I talk about ideology. These people don't believe in Canada as a nation. It's just not part of their belief system. And that is the problem. On the one hand, you want to hamper natural economic growth. On the other hand, you want to bring in all sorts of people indiscriminately, open border invasion even. And UK is a manifestation of that. We don't want Islamism. We don't want Hamas supporters. We don't want those people who don't believe in Western values to come to this country. That is what we escaped from.
I'll let Mehrdad respond to that, and then I'll do a final question.
Again, juxtaposition of assertion. So I don't get into that. So the thing is, when you mentioned the number, the quotas for immigration, and I always remember one of the famous CEOs says, this is because it happened because of the pandemic. And he said, this is my first pandemic. It was everyone's first pandemic. So on one hand, you got huge labor shortage that you have to respond. And you are flying in a cloud. So
not by 2023, when another million people were let in.
Again, they went overboard with that. They made a mistake, obviously, with that, which they've corrected. And lesson learned, but the fact is what has made Canada actually the values and the economic benefit and the prosperity and its stance in the world is based on immigration. We are a country of immigrants. That's reality.
And Pierre doesn't have any issues.
Well, absolutely. But again, I go back to the rational management of these platforms. Again, at one side, I see a platform which I can criticize. On the other side, I don't see a platform.
What is the platform? You didn't tell us.
Well, no. Actually, don't quote me on that. Go and see. Mark Carney has a platform. He's articulated. He has talked so many times about it.
And the Conservative Party doesn't have a platform?
Well, they are attacking. Well, they have to define, Mr. Poilievre has to define himself in a way that when he comes to mind is other than someone who's just attacked his opponent. What is he standing for?
Because I've heard this argument before, so it's a legitimate argument, but I just don't understand where it comes from, because I can at least list you 5 policies that Mark Carney copy-pasted exactly from Pierre's book, like the GST elimination for home buyers. For carbon tax, like these people
from Pierre Poilievre.
Copied from Pierre Poilievre. I mean, Pierre Poilievre has specific policies, like 15% tax reduction, this and that, and then Mark Carney all of a sudden came in, copy-pasted, as opposed to what he was arguing just a few months ago. Don't you believe that these people were arguing for a carbon tax? They said carbon tax is not a carbon tax for consumers because we are paying them back in terms of rebate. And it's good for you. And then all of a sudden it said, oh, sorry, we're bringing it back to zero. What is that sort of flip-flopping? I think that is a platform that is only only doing what is necessary in election season, but the ideologies are still there. Whereas Pierre's policies, just as a 10, 12, 15 policies.
You should have brought a book that you could hold up every.
That's
He's holding this book up the whole time.
Well, the thing is,
For those of you who are listening,
Well,
he's got
read
a
this book,
Mark
yeah.
Carney book that
actually, and there are very interesting.
Have you
actually,
seen it?
Yeah, I have read
I'm
the
sure,
book.
yeah.
So the thing is, there are an interesting quote in the book, and which is using it, and it has a philosophical ground in, and building an economy that is based on values, which is very, very important again. And we all vie for that. We just don't want companies act irresponsibly in terms of going and pollute the environment or use child labor. And we are very much so, the new generation, ourselves included, probably we were the pioneer of that, our generation, Generation X, right? We don't want the companies that are just, and again, being with the math and the statistics background, yeah, the company is accountable to shareholder, but it goes beyond that. And that's Mark Carney's take on it, to stakeholders. And we are all living in the same society. So the thing is, the company go and unpack and leave what's happening in Canada, for example, is that responsible? So for example, you want to see the big banks outsource all the IT work, offshore it, and leave nothing here. Those are some of the things I have very, very strong opinion about, right? Given that we go through these challenges that we face now.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that Mark Carney actually has a much more rational stance on and clear stance
As
on,
a mathematician and engineer or AI person, do you like the idea of social engineering, the way that the government needs to manage the ESGs and the type of policies that you mentioned?
Well, the thing is, what are you arguing for? Are you arguing
No,
that's happening
by rationality, you mean a rational government basically top-down designing what the people would like.
Well, again, I always frame things and contextualize it properly. So I have to understand what context you're putting that argument in.
Because that's the difference between so let's talk about values of the conservative values versus liberal values, as we see liberal values. I mean, liberal values used to be different, but now they more and more look like a Chinese top-down authoritarian society where the government determines everything. And this is what we've seen.
Well, to be fair, I mean, what Mehrdad has very consistently been saying throughout this, sometimes as a bit of an out, to be honest, but has been saying he wants a pragmatic government. He wants a government, and that is what we hear from people who believe in voting liberal. They don't want, they worry about extremes.
That's
and there's
a contradiction, Jian. I mean, either you believe in values or you're pragmatic. I mean, pragmatic in a sense of reaching your values with the least cost. I don't see what there's a
contradiction.
Let me tell you what. Because as a politician, if you're pragmatist, you can be conservative today and you can be liberal tomorrow. But if you have values, you have principles, and then you're only pragmatic in a sense of choosing the least costly way to reach your values. Conservatives believe in individualism. And as somebody from an Iranian background, I appreciate that. We come from a society where the government thinks that they know better than you do. And the liberals are exactly like that.
I need to go to the last question because you guys have been, I'm so grateful to both of you. I had no idea we would go so long, but it's been so good. I haven't wanted to stop. A very simple, excuse me, a very simple question to end with. And just take a minute each. And what do you most want Iranian Canadians to be thinking about going to the polls at the end of this month? What do you most want Iranian Canadians to be thinking about as they're going into the polls at the end of this month for the Canadian federal election? Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
All right.
I want Iranian to think beyond their immediate interest and think as an individual and as a citizen, and ask themselves what it means to be an Iranian Canadian, and go and have a conversation, irrational interactions with others. As John Dewey said, and you brought up pragmatism, democracy starts with conversation. Have a conversation. Have a conversation with a fellow Iranian. Have a conversation with someone from a different community. Have a conversation with someone who has been here for many, many generations. And have a discussion about what really matters to you, what really matters to them, and find a common ground. Because Canada, more than anything, is a country of common sense. Let's find that common sense.
All right, nicely done.
That's a very good way of concluding his liberal position, because conservatives call themselves the party of common sense. And that's what we want to go back to. Common sense, politics. You have oil and gas, you're a resource-rich country. You want to explore that. You want to diversify your exports. You want to build pipelines to do that. You want to bring down inflation. You don't want a big government that overspends irresponsibly. So you remember Trudeau always saying, we are going to pour money here and there. Serb, $7 billion wasted on what? Wasted. And corruption, which comes with big government, right? So I want my fellow Iranian Canadians to think about this. If you think that Canada is on the right path, vote for Mark Carney. Mark Carney is the same, with the same ideology, obviously much smarter, in the way of more effectively following the wrong policies, which is against natural resources. We forgot to mention crime. You just go and search crime from 2002 to 2014, 15. It was coming down. And now we see with the specific catch and release laws, it's going up every single year. So I want to think about everyday life and the influence of Islamic Republic. Keep that in mind. Hopefully,
what was Reagan's? Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Exactly.
You're going to make it 9 years ago.
Simple.
That's
Very simple.
I
Yes,
just
and
want to
no.
add
Very
something.
simple.
By common sense, and exactly that goes to the heart of my argument. By common sense, I didn't meant a soundbite that can be used by a political party as a deep conceptual.
Too late.
Yeah,
This will be edited.
No, exactly.
No, it's just common sense. If it's going well, just vote the
As
same
a concept, what it
way. It's just saying that if you want a different result, you have to just do a different thing than you were doing in the past.
Mehrdad Loghmani, Sadeq Bigdeli, it's been a pleasure. Thank you both. 3 weeks to go. Maybe you'll be back in here before, and we'll see where the race is.
Join
in a couple weeks. Merci, Varan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
so much.
Merci.
Thank you.
Khudafis.
All right, there you have it. The great Iranian-Canadian voting debate. Thanks to Sadeq and Mehrdad. I thought that was really interesting, invigorating, and very interested to hear what you have to say. If you want to post on any of our platforms, please do so. Let us know what you think. Or you can email us at info@roqemedia.com. info@roqemedia.com. By the way, for all information, updates, videos, previous episodes, photos, everything, our gallery, go to roqemedia.com, our website, and you'll find it all there. Next week on the show, Andy joining me for a feature interview. We'll also bring you the ideas of the Roqe Hub, full performance and conversation with King Ram in the coming days. In the meantime, thanks to the amazing team who put this show together each week. Super 𝑫𝑰𝑶𝐷, Savvy Roham, Tina the photo and video queen, 𝐿𝐿 the OG. And special thanks to Smart Pega, Talented Anahita, Methodical 𝐉𝐞𝐥𝐬. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and for sharing our content. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you're, whatever platform you're looking at this ad on or listening to this on, if you haven't actually subscribed, do so. You can find us as Roqe Media on Telegram, on SoundCloud, on CastBox, on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, on Instagram. And on Instagram, our handle is Roqe Media. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. Have yourself an invigorating weekend. Remember to vote in the upcoming Canadian election if you're eligible. And in the meantime, as ever, Mizun Bashin.